Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today we're returning to the Psychiana lessons written by Frank B. Robinson. Go back and check out the previous episodes if you haven't. If you're a fan of New Thought, it's an absolute must read. The history behind Psychiana is very interesting. Remember, this is coming out after the Depression, and people are really starting to understand the power of their minds to create reality, because they had just seen this depression occur where there was a collective depression that literally influenced the economy. And so people started to question their belief system. And so he's speaking to those people that are starting to realize and believe in something greater, in something different than they had been taught their entire lives. Really, he's talking about the law of attraction, but he calls it the God law. And he has a different way of teaching it than many other authors that we've dealt with on the podcast. He has a certain excitement and advertising quality that keeps you interested in this, but unveils new and tiny details every time. And if we go back over what we've learned so far, we've been given some interesting techniques and understandings on how to access the God law. And right now we're getting into the meat of these teachings. As I've said before, you don't have to listen to these in order. Each one is its own episode. This is really discussing how the law is automatic and sort of giving his own personal experience, how he changed his beliefs. Psychiana Advanced Course Number 1, Lesson 11. Dear friend and student, here is lesson number 11. It is very important and also highly interesting and instructive. It will show you what one man was able to do and what he did do when he realized, first of all, his own impotence without the great God law, and his own importance with this great God law. It is an admitted fact, I think, that the great unseen spiritual God realm is by far the most important realm in existence. An electric light bulb is positively useless without electricity running through it. So are you without the God law running through you. Study this important lesson closely. Do faithfully the simple little exercises prescribed. Put the God law to work in your own life. Then when you really do that, just see what happens. For God is true. This mighty invisible creative intelligence and law really exists. Let it work for you. Your friend and teacher, Frank B. Robinson. This is the lesson in which I promised to tell you exactly the remarkable change from poverty to success which happened in my own life. For it was a remarkable change. I don't like to tell the story personally, though, and wish someone else would tell it to you for me. There's quite a temptation where one is telling the story of his own success to overestimate himself a little. But I know of that tendency, so shall guard against it. I would not tell the story at all, were it not for the fact that it will help you to realize something of the existence of the God law. And in passing, let me say that everything I have been enabled to do in the past 2 years is directly due to the presence and existence of the mighty spiritual power. So the God law must have the credit for it all. True, it is that a knowledge or a faith in the existence of such a spiritual law or power had to be there. But in reality, the actual demonstration of the things done by this power through me is the very strongest sort of evidence that the power exists. I am no different now from what I have ever been. I am the same Frank B. Robinson. No change in my nature has occurred. I have not experienced any supernatural or divine change called conversion, not at all. The only change that has come to me is the fact that now I believe in the existence and power of the mighty life spirit, and I believe in it here and now. I used to believe that God is in heaven and would reward the pilgrims after death. Now, I don't believe such chatter at all, for I know that God is a living and dynamic power everywhere, all omnipotent and better than all, operating or rather in existence, in order that every human being, including you and me, can here and now take from this mighty God the things we need. This is exactly what the Galilean carpenter preached, but it is also exactly what those pretending to be following him do not preach today. Until I advanced this philosophy of life and God, however, I had been a most miserable failure. Just the same sort of failure that thousands write me today and tell me that they are. But in the very moment that I put the mighty God law to work in my life of failure, then this life of mine was changed into a life of success and influence, and it was done in mighty short order too. For as this is written, it is not yet 22 months since I was selling paints and powders and lipsticks and perfume behind a drugstore counter right here in Moscow for $175 a month. And I can say to you very frankly and very honestly here that I had not stepped out on the promises of God, I should still be there in that drugstore, and the chances are many to one that I would never have been heard of. It goes to show you how the mighty God law really works. I want you to follow this lesson very carefully, for I shall cover the path trod by me step by step, and shall endeavor very earnestly to show you the things I did in order to put myself where this mighty God law could operate. In passing, let me say that all failure that ever manifested in my life was not due to the other powers of evil, as so many write me about, but was due in its entirety to my ignorance of the existence of the God law here and now operating for my success. There are not two powers in the world, the one good and the other evil. There is but one power, and that is all good. People often write to me asking where the devil originated. Only yesterday a preacher wrote to me asking where the sickness, poverty, illness, disease, and sin came from, if there were no evil spirit in existence as the Bible teaches. Well, I'll tell you, all of these unwanted things are not due to the power of evil at all. They are the natural results which must follow a life lived in ignorance of the God law. Darkness is not a thing. When you turn out the light at night in a room, you have darkness. But no such thing called darkness enters when the lights are turned off. Certainly not, for there is no such thing as darkness. If you think there is, take a shovel and try to shovel it out of the room. No, my friend, darkness is only the absence of light. It is the normal, natural condition that must exist where there is no light. And so failure, sickness, so-called sin, and poverty and disease and unhappiness are all the natural and normal results of the absence of the God law in the human life. Where the God law is not used, there can manifest nothing but failure, and all the rest of these other things that are not so nice, they are not due to a power of evil at all. Remember this, please. The same thing applies to what we call success and failure. There's no such thing in reality as failure. It is but the absence of success. Do you see that? I think you will. The presence of unhappiness is not real. It is but the absence of the God law governing happiness. The same thing applies also to health. I do not say, of course, that there is no such thing as illness or disease, for anyone with ordinary brains knows that there is a lot of just those things in the world today. But I do say that these things are all very unnatural and exist only because the God law governing their very opposites is not being used. You see, where the law exists, it exists only for the very things we desire. It exists only to manifest the very finer things of life. No God law could possibly manifest unhappiness, sickness, or poverty. Such things are foreign to the God law. Neither could this mighty invisible power manifest unhappiness or illness or disease. And you may depend upon it that if you are poor, If you are unhappy, if you are ill, it is purely and simply because the God law is not being used by you in your daily life. I don't care how far you want to carry this. By no possible means can the spiritual law of God manifest any of these undesirable things. It is only the absence of the law that makes these things real, or in fact, that makes them exist at all. Many of us, however, have believed for so long that poverty, failure, and unhappiness are a very fundamental part of the human race, that it seems mighty hard to grasp the fact that these things need not be. And they won't be either when the power of the living God is used against them. For is not God life? Can he be death, in any sense of the word? Can this mighty God law be illness or unhappiness, in any sense of the word? I don't think so. One of my most frequent clashes with religionists is on account of their attitude and teaching that you and I are but guilty, lost, hell-deserving sinners, or pilgrims along life's highway, destined and expected to go through life with nothing more solid than hope of a home in heaven to comfort us. I don't believe that. I believe in the existence of the spiritual God law, here and now, more than I know that this spiritual law exists. For many years I lived in complete ignorance of this mighty law, but no more. For there is not a moment of the day in which I do not use it. I live in it, and so do you. So why not use it? If you don't use it, then it is simply because of your ignorance of its existence or your apathy of life. However, I think the vast majority of my students really do want to be happy, successful, and healthy in life. And so I shall address myself to such students. Never does a day go by that I do not receive letters from happy and very satisfied students regarding the finding of the God law. And this fact alone, if no other more, than demonstrates the fact that such a law, such a power, really exists. This being a fact, then the thing for you to do is to apply this mighty law in your own life. I shall never forget the fear and trembling with which I first stepped out. Just a little step on the mighty God law I believed to exist. Never shall I forget it. Here I was, a failure, and in me were all the racial tendencies of millions of years probably. All down through the ages, these tendencies have been to worship some unseen power or other. But none of these quasi-religious teachings have ever taught anything other than the presumed fact that the unseen power they teach is a divine and therefore an unnatural power. There has to be a God of some sort or other. Almost invariably, this God lives in the sky somewhere. Men and women have been taught down through the ages to live in fear. Fear of God. Fear of some of God's agents. Fear of oneself. Fear of hellfire. Fear of purgatory. Fear of being a lost soul, etc. And it is my contention that no really true religion can have its basis in fear of anyone or anything. Yet they all have. And this is the reason for their impotence. For it is useless to deny that the present-day systems of religion are utterly impotent and useless as far as this human life goes. They are not destined to be of any use here. They deal with the future. They deal with an unknown God. Therefore, it was but natural that there was a certain amount of hesitancy about my putting the God law to the test. This was not at all a lack of faith on my part, but it was the natural sequence, as I state, of hereditary tendencies and beliefs of thousands and perhaps millions of years. And I could not be blamed too much for it. I had it, I confess. You have it too, the chances are, and it is but natural that the question as to the existence of a real living God law, which can operate here and now, should be at times quite pertinent. Children give up their playthings reluctantly, and so these old idolatrous superstitions go slowly. They are going through, and they never went as fast as they are going today. We see it all over the world, and it's good to see too. And the reason they are going is simply because human race as a whole is recognizing the fact that there is nothing of further interest in any of these systems of supernaturally revealed religion. We've had them on earth for centuries, and nothing enlightening has ever come from them. No help on earth has ever been received yet by anyone. True, it might be a fine thing for after death, but you see, there's no proof of that. And so, as the matter stands now, these systems are universally recognized to be quite useless, so we are discarding them. Their strain will remain, though, for many years to come, and it will probably be quite a few decades before the human race entirely discards all supernaturally revealed religion and finds and uses only naturally revealed religion. For that is the need of the world today. Men and women are caring less and less for the future and more interested in the here and now. As I write this story of how the mighty God law changed my life, I find myself looking back over the years. I see the little country church at which my dad preached. I remember the little house we lived in. I remember the stone wall with the wallflowers growing on top of it, and which separated our little home from that of the gentleman next door. I remember distinctly sitting before the fire of the living room with a book in my hands containing pictures of Indians. I remember the old well in the yard with the water bucket attached, and I remember now I was warned never to go near that well under any circumstances. I can remember back pretty well to the time I was less than 1 year old. But the one outstanding memory which will be forever planted in my mind is the memory of the day, a beautiful summer's day, on which I laid on my back on the grass in the little yard we had connected with the house. The sky was of an azure blue that day, and both sun and moon were visible. I just laid there. It was my 3rd birthday, I remember, and looked up into yon heavens, and I was somewhat awestruck with the magnificence of it all. My thoughts ran along the line of religion as taught in the old Baptist church by my dad. Suddenly it seemed that I was lifted from that lawn, although of course I knew I was not. And there seemed to come to me a sense of the very nearness of God, the mighty life spirit I now am teaching. I was told it seemed in an unmistakable manner that I should be used to bring to the world a new revelation of God. I seemed carried into a realm completely beyond this earthly sphere, and the impression then and there, indelibly written on my young mind, was the fact of the existence of God right here on this earth. I seemed to be told that what was masquerading as religion was utterly false, and I saw myself that day leading a new and true system of thought with men and women by the thousands accepting it. That dream of 43 years ago is coming true now today. The vision, or whatever it was forgotten for many years though, and, like the rest of my brothers, I was brought up in the good old-fashioned Orthodox way, a lost sinner, etc. No hope beyond the tomb, divine revelation, repentance and conversion, and all the rest of it. Somehow or other it wouldn't take, and I surely am glad now that it didn't take. I've always thanked the powers that be for giving me an open, honest nature, and a nature that will not accept anything as truth unless the presumption is strong that it is the truth. I will analyze what people say. I will put what they say up against what they do. I will very carefully examine a story, and if there be no evidence of the truth of the story, then, in the absence of other circumstances, I shall discard the story. I shall not weary you with the complete story of my struggles through the years. Probably wouldn't interest you anyhow, and that is all being now written in another book, and perhaps you will read it in detail someday soon. Suffice to say that all through the years, deeply religious as I was, there was ever and always an undying hunger for God. I wanted to know who and what He was. I wanted to know about Him. I suspected faintly there might perhaps be some way that I did not know of coming to that mighty God and obtaining from Him whatever happiness my soul craved. But I didn't find it. I knew, and from close connection, that my parents knew nothing about God, even though Dad preached about this God of his every day and twice on Sunday. But you see, I lived in that home, and I knew that no power of God was ever manifested in Dad's life at all. I knew that he didn't even believe the story he preached. With the mother, however, it was a different story, for what an angel she was, if ever there was one. She didn't live long after my birth, however, perhaps 10 years, so I never had the chance to know her really well. But say, that memory ever lingers with me. When she died and the specialist was called, I was taken into the bedroom for a last look at her. I gazed on that dying form, knowing full well that she was going. But I didn't realize what it meant. I didn't realize what death was. And a couple of days later, when the casket lay on the bier in front of the old Baptist church, I sat with my dad in the front row. And still, I didn't seem to realize what it all meant. The old reed organ played. Sands of time are sinking, the dawn of heaven breaks, and as the choir sang that wonderful old hymn, with the several others amongst which was "A few more years shall roll," I looked up at Dad. I saw where the tears streaming down his strong face as his friend, the Reverend Henry Davis, preached the funeral message and tried to comfort him. Looking up into that grief-scarred face, I said, "Daddy, what are you crying for? You still have me." I only mention this experience here in order that you may intelligently picture the various steps through which I came in search of God, which search ended in finding His mighty power. Then the service was over. They carried her to the little cemetery, and there, to this day, what remains of that tranquil soul rests. On the way back in the hack, seeing Daddy heartbroken, I crept up to him and putting my arms around his neck, I said, "Don't cry, Daddy. You'll see her in the morning." But in the morning came. He didn't see her. And many mornings have come and gone since then, and still, he hasn't seen her. He never will. I think perhaps that death made a marked impression on me, for I continued my search for God according to the methods prescribed by the Orthodox religionists and others who believe in the unnatural story of Jesus Christ coming down to earth to save the entire human race from its sins. But as I have stated, these methods did not work. They may work for others, but they did not work for me. I think I have been to the penitent form over 100 times, and I know I was baptized 7 times, and still it wouldn't work. However, one day after many years searching, I just discarded the whole thing, and then things happened. I found God. Isn't it passing strange that I should find the God I was looking for when I denied that story, as told by those who said they represented God, was true? That is the fact of it, though. But the years rolled by, and soon we found ourselves with absolutely no future at all. I had a job in a drugstore in Moscow. I was over 40 years of age and no life insurance, no money, no car, nothing at all. I was a registered pharmacist in several states, but as far as accomplishing anything worthwhile, well, I had never done it. I was a rank and out failure in life. We lived in a little rented apartment, and as fast as the skimpy salary came, it went again. The future was black. It held nothing for me. Upon discarding the theories taught to me in my youth, which theories, of course, were expected to make a Christian out of me, the light of the truth of God broke in my life. I've told you of that, however, in the large lecture I sent to you, so will not repeat it here. Just in passing, may I say that after an entire lifetime spent in fruitless attempt to find God by the methods given to me by the church, and also my parents, the day came in which I was convinced that such methods did not work. Therefore, I concluded that they must be untrue. I also had a very grave doubt shortly afterwards in regards to the entire Bible story and the plan of salvation as taught me in my childhood and youth. In my free lecture, I told you of the day on which I finally, in desperation and disgust, threw all supernaturally revealed religion to the 4 winds. I denied that the story of a combination of man and God coming to earth to save people by the repentance and salvation method was true. I knew that not a living soul had ever tried to find God any harder than I had. And I also knew that if He were not to be found after such efforts as I put forth, the chances were there never was such a being at all who had created a salvation as hard to find as this one was. I have never denied the existence of a master intelligence, and even though I threw overboard the whole Christian church formula, that does not by any means infer that I threw overboard my beliefs in God. It just simply means that I threw overboard all faith in the God my parents and numerous churches had taught. As I looked into the story a little further, the more I learned of it and its origin, the less faith I had in any of it. I know now that it is not true, although of course I could not know it then. Trustingly, I had believed everything that my parents and the different preachers had told me, and swallowed the story, hook, line, and sinker, as thousands are still doing. Never, for one instant, did it ever occur to me that the story might be false, as I later proved it to be. I have thanked my parents many a time for raising a man who was so filled with indomitable desire to find out the truth of God that he was willing to challenge the entire structure, if necessary, in his search for the truth. And as the years rolled by, and as I attended theological school and continued my studies into the Holy Writ, I found out the chances are that it is wholly wrong, and nothing more or less than a remnant of idolatrous and pagan superstition. I claim the story told by the Orthodox Church today to be nothing more or less than that. Thousands of years before Christ was ever heard of, millions of people knew the story of the supernatural birth, in the resurrection, the ascension, and I found that there was not a single thing that could be said in favor of Christ being the Savior of the world that could not also be said in favor of a dozen other crucified saviors. I learned that the authorship of the four Gospels is absolutely unknown. I learned that no proof of the story was to be had. It was all based on belief. And it is my contention that any system of thought or philosophy of life upon which we are asked to trust our soul's future welfare should at least be capable of proof. And no system of religion should be allowed to operate in this country that cannot prove its claims. The church comes to us with a story that a certain man lived who was God. It tells us that we are lost sinners. It tells us that we're born in sin and shapen in iniquity. And it further tells us that unless we repent and be baptized and saved, that we shall in no wise inherit the kingdom of heaven. It tells us that we are lost souls unless we accept the story it brings to us. It is my contention that the church should be made to prove the truth of that story, and if it cannot prove it, it should certainly not be allowed privileges no one else is allowed. However, this lesson is not to show the falsity of the existing religious system at all. I merely mention these facts in passing to show that the definition and story of God that the church gives to the world is not true. At any rate, it cannot be proven, and in the absence of proof of its verity, I shall, in the light of my experiences with it, pronounce the teaching false. So I say, I discarded the entire thing, and, strange to relate, the discarding of religious church tradition was the very thing that brought to me the first faint smattering of the truth of the life spirit God, as he really exists. And the more convinced I became of the falsity of the church story, the more convinced and assured did I become of the existence of the real God, the power the church knows nothing about. I knew absolutely that there existed here and now a divinely natural spirit or force or power that could bring into existence everything the human soul can possibly need, whether it be health, success, or happiness. I say I knew that. I was as sure of it as I was that I was alive. I had not demonstrated any of its power in a material way yet, but I had been filled with a sweet peace of mind that I had never had before. I knew in whom I was believing, and the ever-present power of the living God was a revelation to me every day of my life. But the gnawing at my soul for the good things of life was insistent, and I wanted to do the things necessary to be done in order to actually manifest the good things of life I needed. Here I was, happy in the presence of the mighty life spirit, but still in the drugstore and still packing the things I wanted to have, which things were necessary to my happiness to complete it. While pondering on the stupendous question of the literal existence of God amongst his created beings here on earth, one day I seemed to be given a revelation of the entire picture. I saw the life spirit, God, as this spiritual being exists. I saw the significance of the story of the fall of man. In fact, it seemed that there was given to me that Sunday afternoon in that drugstore the full and complete picture of this world, its creator, and his creation. I saw with remarkable clarity things as they are, and the vision has never left me. I saw then, and still see, how very false is the teaching that the mighty intelligence behind all created things sent himself down to earth in the form of one individual man to save the entire creation, which otherwise would be eternally lost. I knew then and there that such a story was but superstition and tradition, and very poor tradition at that. But I also saw the true relationship man bears to the great creative life spirit, and as I write this to you this Thursday afternoon, I am staggered still at the stupendous import of it all. Many times I am not understood. Many times there is heaped upon my head epithets, which are very cruel and wrong, and which I do not deserve, but I cannot give to men and women the full significance of that picture except as led to do so. I'm doing it as carefully and as intelligently as is humanly possible, and I suppose I must go through a period of misunderstanding on the part of the religiously inclined before they will see the divinely natural truths I am giving to the world. That must be as it may, however, for I cannot do any worrying about what others think of me. I know, and I know full well, in whom I believe. I know whose power sustains me. I know something of the divinely natural spirit power of God, and knowing that power, I smile at trials and tribulations as fearlessly and very successfully go forward, knowing that shortly the existence of this mighty power, law, God, will be universally known and believed. It was Sunday afternoon when this picture came to me, and I was in a feverish haste to transfer it to writing. I had no typewriter, however, so the next morning I borrowed one from a dentist friend of mine, in the meantime making notes in my pocketbook. On Monday, I took the little vest pocket typewriter to the apartment and advised my family that I desired to be strictly left alone. As fast as my fingers would travel, I wrote that story down on paper. Inside of 1 week, it was finished, and not a word of it has been changed from that day to this. That was that. Here I was with the typewritten story and the copyright on it and no money. I want you, my student, to note carefully what happened from now on. I did not sit on my haunches waiting for some rich uncle to die and leave me enough money to publish this work. Nor did I get down on my knees and pray for the money to come. I knew better than that. I knew in what power I was believing, and I stepped out on that very power. Remember, please, that it was all new to me and was contrary to all that I had been taught about the operations of God. But then, you will remember I had discarded the old traditional Yahweh and had exchanged him for the true light, and from now on, I was living in that light. For months and months prior to this revelation, or whatever you care to call it, I was trying to learn how to have faith in the living God law. I wanted success. I wanted a good home. I wanted a car. I wanted a pipe organ. I wanted to be in a position where the wolf would not get at my back door. So I did the only thing I could have done. I knew that the life spirit existed for the express purpose of being my all in all, and for the purpose of giving to me whatsoever things I desired. I say I knew that, but how was I to get these things? I did the only thing I could do, and the thing that thousands write and ask me about in their own lives. I didn't bother my head about the means to be employed in bringing these things I wanted to me. I just simply placed myself in a receiving attitude, knowing full well that God would never disappoint me. Hundreds of thousands of times I repeated this sentence: "You have brought me success. You have made me wealthy." I kept everlastingly at this. In every spare moment I had, in the basement of the drugstore while unpacking boxes and crates, every waking moment was filled with that thought, for I knew it was a fact, and I wanted the God law to know that I knew it was a fact. For I knew that by so doing I was putting into actual operations the very law that would bring these things to me. You have brought success. You have made me wealthy. That is the law of the spiritual realm. It is the law of God. It is God. And though but a man, never let anyone tell you that Jesus Christ did not understand spiritual law, for he understood it to the very full. But you will remember the church members crucified him as they would do again today if he returned with the same revolutionary message that he brought in that day and age. He preached a present religion. He preached a present and perfectly natural power, but it was not wanted. People did not want a reasonable religion at all. They did not want a God who could do things for them then. They, in keeping with all other systems of supernaturally revealed religion, wanted the same old Trinity and crucifixion and resurrection story, so they took that story, dressed it up in a garb of their own, and foisted it off on the unsuspecting world as the real religion, just as all the others with the same story claimed. And today, it is being found out for what it is, that it is untrue. These repeated affirmations of truth were not influencing God at all, but they were establishing the connection through which the divinely natural God law could work. For this law cannot and will not work where one is unwilling to take from the law the things one most needs. How could it work in any other way? This God law is what might be termed an automatic law. In the very moment one actually believes in its existence and takes it as an established fact that the God law can and will give them what they need. When that is done, let me repeat, the results are very sure. Don't forget this. Then the answer came. I received the picture of the spiritual truth, and the means was put into my hands by which these things I wanted would come to me. The following night, after obtaining the copyright, I put the lessons I have received in my pocket, and in a blinding snowstorm, started downtown. Mrs. R asked me where I was going. I told her that I should need about $2,500 to get my teaching printed, and further informed her that I should return that night with $500. I had not the slightest suspicion where I was going or whom I was going to see, for I had not a friend in the city. I had only been here a short time, and no one, of course, knew me. So, who I was going to see that night, I knew not. However, the first man I met was a young fellow who happens to be now the vice president of this corporation. I asked him if he had any money. He told me that he had $500, and I explained to him what I wanted to do. I got the $500, and inside of 2 days had another similar amount from his brother-in-law. I won't go into detail here any more than to say that inside of a week, I had enough money to get 1,000 completed copies of the Revelation printed, and also 10,000 of several different sorts of letters printed. After placing my first advertisements in a magazine, we had $16.47 to our name. But the public recognized the truth of the advertisement, and it wasn't very long until things were entirely changed around. At first, I worked all day long in the drugstore and looked after the mailing at night. Then I rented a cheap little office and hired a girl to work half days. Then I was forced to give half my time to the rapidly growing business, so I went on half time at the drugstore. This was not to be, though, for the inquiries continued to rush in, and shortly I was giving all of my time to the work. And see how God works, I was drawing a salary of $500 a month. From that day to this, 21 months later, the story is well known. Every conceivable thing I could desire has come to me through the power of the self-existent life spirit God. Inside of 1 year, some part or other of my teachings was going into 67 different countries, and we had 2 books in existence. The second year, we had our own magazine and brotherhood. Now, it takes an office staff of 10 people to handle the mail, and this is about 21 months later. I live in my own home now, which I wanted. I own a very fine car, which I also wanted. I have thousands of dollars of life insurance, which I also wanted. I have a very beautiful pipe organ, which I certainly did want. And all of these things have been obtained in 21 months through applying the divinely natural law of God in my life. I did not ask, how is it going to be done? Nor did I argue with God in an effort to try and help him out a little. Not that I just simply adopted the attitude that Life Spirit could and would supply all my needs according to its infallible power and might. And when I really believed that, it didn't take very long for the needed things to come. And when you actually and literally believe God, it won't take very long for them to come to you either, my friend. Millions of people see my picture every month, and hundreds of thousands have heard my voice over the radio. Psychiana is going all over the world. And best of all, thousands of others are daily finding that the message I give them comes pretty nearly being the truth. Some folks might have thought that I was a little off if they knew that hundreds of thousands of times I forced myself to mentally say, "You have brought me success. You have made me wealthy." But I meant business. I believed God, and the results speak for themselves, I think. Had there never been any superstitious religious teachings, I would not be necessary for one to have to force themselves to believe in his creator. But it is necessary now, and it will probably be for many years yet, until people as a whole see how utterly wrong it is to believe such foolish traditions. God is law, a mighty operating spiritual law. This law is here for your benefit and for mine. This law made you, It made me. It made every created thing that ever was made, and it did not spit on the ground to do it. This is a self-existent God law. It is eternal. It ruled and existed since the beginning of time, for in reality there is no time. It is but an effect, and Einstein is right. It is a spiritual law, and it is the entire spiritual realm. It is all of the spiritual realm. There is no such thing as a spiritual realm without God, the great law. There are no angels hovering around, or was there ever a fallen angel called Lucifer? That is allegory and superstition, and you should know it by this time if you don't. This great spiritual law, or God, controls and governs the whole universe by the power of his own law, or in other words, by himself. There never was a created thing that did not originally have its inception in the realm of God, the great spiritual law. No matter what the processes of creation may be, behind them all stands this God law, and is ever yet creating, and it will ever be creating. In the upward trend of man and his evolution, there looms in the immediate future a spiritual understanding of this spiritual realm. This realm of God, without attempting here to analyze the various processes by which the material is manifest from the spiritual, we know enough of God to know the one great fundamental governing all physical manifestations. It is not necessary that we know the why or the how. All that is necessary is that we recognize the stupendous fact that God is, and that he is ever creating as his creatures need. We know, I say, what the one great predominating and overshadowing fact ruling this marvelous law is. We know for a positive fact just how to draw this mighty spiritual power into our own lives with its omnipotent wisdom and its unerring and unfailing power. We know that Jesus Christ knew it. The great souls of the ages have all known it. True, many of them were not conscious of the law, but they used it just the same, even though unconscious of what it actually was they were using. You will see here why many benefits have been credited to Jehovah or Yahweh, when as a matter of fact he had nothing whatsoever to do with them. There are many good, honest, intentioned souls in existence who will swear to you that they pray to Jesus Christ, and in return for such prayers they receive this and they receive that. But we know that Jesus Christ died 2,000 years ago, and we know the story that he came back from the dead is but legend, and is nothing more than the old resurrection story of the other religions told over again. We know positively that Jesus Christ is not in heaven seated at the right hand of God and making intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. We know, for our reason tells us, that such is not the case. Yet many, many good souls will tell us with much conviction they receive their answers to their prayers direct from this source. This is not a fact, for once more the story of the world's Savior sitting at the right hand of his Father in heaven is like the crucifixion and resurrection stories pagan myth retold. What actually happens is this: in these cases, a presumed answer to prayer by Yahweh or Jehovah. The earnest believer pins his faith in Jehovah or Christ or Krishna or Buddha or Confucius or one of the many other divinely born saviors, and they put into use the law governing the true God, even though they think they are praying to an entirely different being. So sure is the law of God that when faith is used, it makes no difference what that faith may be pinned to, it will work. This is, of course, proven positively that the God law exists and actually works, even though the petitioner knows not from whence the answer comes. And to this extent there is some good in the Christian religion, not in its belief, however, for every thinking mind knows full well that these are neither reasonable or scientific. But the practice of prayer brings the result, even though the being prayed to never existed. Do you see that? I'm sure you do. There are people who worship the sun. Those good folk can show us many answers to prayer coming from the sun. But you and I both know that the sun had nothing to do with the answering of their prayers. Yet, evidently they received their answers no matter what philosophy of life one may choose to adopt. If one believes in it hard enough and lives it, it will work out. How much more intelligent is it, therefore, to really draw from the creative God power itself the things we need, than to have as a God a being whose every moment from his birth up has been shrouded in unbelievable miracles and mystery. I cannot believe the Bible story at all. There is too much to be taken for granted in it. Or can I believe that angels came down from heaven and said to Krishna, "Rise, holy love, rise," at which the shroud unwound itself from the dead body of his savior, and he came back from the dead and ascended to his Father in heaven? I say I cannot believe that story. Neither can you if you study its origin and its history. But I can believe in the existence of the creative life spirit of this universe. For my reason tells me that such a power or spirit must exist. Chance can have nothing to do with it, or can personality have anything to do with it either? If it could, then you and I would be able to understand the creative personality, and that can never be. Personality of any sort has nothing to do with it. The God law, however, becomes personality only as you and I apply it and use it in our own individual case. This is plain to see. But every system of religion in existence tells us they alone possess the true light, when as a matter of fact they never were farther from the true light than they are when they attempt to attribute to God supernatural powers. There is nothing supernatural about God. If there were anything on the supernatural order about that power, it never would have made a natural universe. The power is not supernatural, but is divinely natural. If I may use that expression, religions have, however, placed their own interpretations on stories of gods galore and have missed the truth. Though trying to confine the God in the middle of their own structure, you may depend upon one thing, though. You may be sure of the fact that the creative intelligence behind this created scheme of things is not contained in the creeds or beliefs of any one society or denomination or organization. It exists outside of them all. And if any one of the followers of these differing systems of religion know anything about spiritual power, they know it through the great God law which is operating throughout the universe and not in their own structure to the exclusion of everyone else. The story that unless ye repent and be baptized you shall be damned is not true, and you know it's not true. So does the church know it's not true. They did not know it 50 years ago, but they know it now. All of them are leaning more and more to the truths I am teaching you in this course of instruction, and the time is coming when the mighty God law will be known by them all. But that time is not here yet. Hence, I say that the man on the street is far more liable to know something of the truths of God than are those who think that God is to be found in their own little denomination. As a matter of fact, they know that this is not so. They know they have never found God through any of the practices they indulge in if they hang on and make a profession. This is not honest. I think my students see at this point there is in existence a mighty operating force which is ever present and omnipotent, which can do anything needed to be done for the human race and for every individual soul, and do it though entirely apart from what we have been used to as agents of God. This power does not operate through any organization, or does it operate through any one man or any of his agents? Or is the power supernatural at all? Nor is prayer necessary to contact this marvelously potent power, nor is repentance, nor is salvation. It is as free as the very air we breathe. Remember here, though, that this mighty power or law is like gravitation, an invisible law. But remember also that it is just as sure. Now at this point, I want you to continue your affirmations with renewed vigor. I want you to make them become very part of your being. I've told you how I did it, and I want you to do it also. Remember, a wishy-washy system of affirming will get you nothing. Just that. But the grim jaw, the clenched fist, the stiff spine, the solid backbone, the determined will, in other words, the faith, will bring the answer every time, and it will bring it in the moment you least expect it. As you continue your affirmation, sooner or later, there will come a time when you will instinctively know that the connection with the law has been made. You will then take it for granted that you will receive that for which your heart longs, and your attitude will be one of watchful expectancy. Then, there will come to you perhaps an idea. It may be a leading, but you will know by the very quietness of the idea or the leading that it comes from the spiritual realm. Then, what lead comes, obey it fully and instantly. Under no circumstances procrastinate. There will never be any question in your mind as to whether the lead or the idea is from the God law or not, for it will appear to you to be the perfectly natural thing to do or the thing you want to be made manifest in your life. It will be a direct step along the road and in the right direction. Now, please realize here, this lesson is being read by thousands and tens of thousands of students coming to me from every walk of life. I cannot know the individual problems of them all. One is a lighthouse keeper, another is a garage mechanic, another is a minister, another is a government official. Many different sorts of people study this course of instruction, and I cannot possibly know them all. Nor can I know their individual problems, but I can give general instructions for contacting the God law, which will work no matter who the student may be and no matter what the problem may be that is worrying the student. I can give you the fundamental law of the living, creative life spirit, and I can say to you with absolute assurance that it is immutable. You cannot use it and fail. You cannot believe in the existence of God without receiving what you desire, for this is the law of God. This is God. Now, in previous lessons, I have given you varying affirmations to use. You've already decided what it is you need in life the most. I've shown you the law. I've shown you how, by applying the law and continually affirming to be a fact, the things I wanted made them actual literal facts. Now I want you to affirm with twice the interest from now on. Be in earnest. Remember that through years of racial tendencies, you've been taught to believe in an entirely different God from the one I am teaching you now. This is the reason affirmations of faith are necessary at all. Let the desire for the thing you want be from now on an all-consuming desire. If you mean business, show the God law that you believe first of all in its existence and also in its power and willingness to provide the means to bring you to whatever right thing you desire. There is another affirmation I used many times when I was struggling to have a little faith in God, and that is the following affirmation. I would clench my fist, and with firmness and a desire that never would admit defeat, I would say, "By God, I will." That is not profanity at all. It is a scientific fact, a theological fact, and a spiritual truth. For if you ever attain the things you need, it will be, not by God's help, but by God. In those days, my friend, I can tell you I meant business. There was no halfway measure here. I knew the God law existed, and I knew that it existed for me, and my mind was made up to find and use that power. And when the necessary faith or belief in the God law was once manifested, my searching was at an end. I have never since doubted this mighty God law, and I receive everything I want to. I wanted a beautiful home and I received it. I wanted a car and I got it. I wanted money in the bank and I have it. I wanted a pipe organ and I have a beautiful instrument now. I wanted life insurance and I have it. I wanted friends and I have them, lots of them. I wanted to tell men and women about God and I am doing it. And all in 21 months from the time I really trusted the living God law. Think of it. From poverty to success in 21 short months and after over 40 years of failure. You tell me the law doesn't work? Not me. You must tell someone else that, for since that time I have seen many hundreds who have found the same law I am teaching. I have seen sickness banished by its power. I've seen death thwarted in its attempt to end the life of some sufferer. I've seen the power of God applied against illness and have seen very unusual things happen. I've seen lives transformed by this mighty power. I've seen wealth supplant poverty. I've seen happiness supplant misery. And I have seen thousands discard an idolatrous superstition and a pagan god for the life spirit. My files contain hundreds and hundreds of letters from students who have found the God law. Inside of 1 year, my teaching was all over the world, one might say. As I write this, we are planning to move for the 4th time into larger quarters. Why? Because all over the world, wherever our teaching goes, men and women are actually finding the truth of our teachings. So you, no matter who you may be, I say, use this unseen dynamic God law. Never let up until you get what you want. Be somewhat like Jacob of old. Hang on by faith in this mighty law, and you will never be disappointed no matter what your needs may be. In the next lesson, we shall go quite a little farther into this subject of the existence of the mighty power, God. Study carefully, be slow about it. Let these truths sink in, and above all, believe in the God I am showing you. Sincerely, your friend and teacher, Frank B. Robinson. Examination questions for lesson number 11. These examination questions are for your benefit, and you should know the answers to them all. If they are not clear to you, read your lesson again and again until they are clear. 1. Contrast Dr. Robinson's present with his former belief. 2. If there be no power of evil or devil in the world, whence comes sickness, poverty, disease, etc.? 3. If you are poor, unhappy, or ill, what is the cause? 4. Why is mankind now discarding supernaturally revealed religions? 5. How did Dr. Robinson answer the question, how am I to get the things I need? 6. Did his repeated affirmations influence God at all? What did they do? 7. In what sense may the God law be called an automatic law? 8. What is it that actually happens in the case of presumed answer to prayer by Jehovah or Christ? 9. Why is the practice of prayer useful, even though made to a being that never existed? 10. To what extent does the God law become personal? 11. Is prayer necessary in order to contact the God law? What then is necessary? 12. How does Dr. Robinson justify the use by him of an apparently profane affirmation when he was struggling to have a little faith in God? And so that concludes lesson 11 from the Psychiana course. After reading these, it is my sincere belief that the most important lesson that Frank Robinson wanted you to believe, and he spends many lessons going over and over again, is just for you to believe in this law. A lot of people struggle with this, and it was the most important thing for me. I didn't believe. It took me a very long time. And so it seems like we're talking about the same thing over and over again, but he says it at the end. It's the most important thing to believe in this law. He even says the affirmation probably isn't doing that as much, but it's connecting me to the God law. It's bringing it up in my mind. So we have had a slow transition to finding the God law, to feeling it, to becoming aware of it, and then choosing our affirmation, and then affirming it in a certain way. And now we're affirming it with power and belief. But each step of the way, we're constantly being told that this God law exists. And yes, I talk about it all the time, but I know that I'm talking to someone that doubts that this law exists. You have to believe that this law exists. And it's hard just to believe that. Once you have some success, even if it's small, you'll start to believe. But once you have that success and you realize the power behind it and you start to use it, you can have miracles happen. And they're not miracles. They're not supernatural. There's an automatic law to this. This law is automatic. If you have the faith and you do it, it might take 21 months. And in my case, it might have taken 48 months. But I didn't give up. Don't give up. I know there are people out there that are imagining and affirming a particular reality, something difficult, and maybe you're wanting to give up. It seems like that you've been doing it forever and you want to give up. Don't give up. I promise you it's doing its work. It started working the moment you started, and everything has its own time. And the belief is the most important thing. This God law is in action. But he does explain that you don't just sit and wait for it to happen. You listen, and when you clearly hear the thought of what you need to do, that intuition comes to you in the silence, and it's clear. Then, at that moment, you take your action. You do not wait. You do not procrastinate at all. So that's the fundamental thing from this lesson. He gives us his story. And it's a story that we've heard before. There's nothing really special about Frank Robinson's story. It is a story I've heard 1,000 times. Somebody's down and out, they're struggling, and they decide they want to change it, and then the only way they can change it is within. That's what happened to me. I was down and out, I was struggling, and I did the same thing. I started to affirm a new reality, I started to imagine it, I started to connect to this God law, and then when I realized that there's this other power that existed, and that it doesn't matter if you're good or bad, it just works all the time. It's not about your morality, you're not being judged, you're not being sent to hell. It just works, it's automatic. And then you start to use it and see it come into action. It's one of the most exciting things. And it's the one thing I just so desperately want you to know. There are people listening to this that don't believe that this law exists. I understand. If you listen to these kind of lessons over and over, you're going to have a small part of your subconscious that says, well, maybe. And that's all it takes. Just give it a chance. Open yourself up to it. Require proof. Test it. And let me know how it goes. Let me know how it's been going so far with the lessons that you've done. If you've actually answered the questions or done the exercises. They're very simple exercises. There's nothing complicated in these exercises. It's just the way he teaches it. And if you want to go through a set of lessons that slowly reveal and explain this God law in this particular way, for many people, it can be very helpful. Everybody comes at an understanding of their spirituality from many different places. This can be one avenue. So I'd love to get your comments and experience and reviews so far of the Psychiana lessons. I may consolidate them in the future, but for now, we'll keep going with them and just let me know. In any case, you can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. Check out the Aura system. In the description, I have a link where you can buy recordings where I explain fully the Aura technique with new meditations and recordings from the first Reality Con, and they're pretty interesting, and you may find something from them. We talk about Neville Goddard and the Law of One. These are things not available on the channel, but you can get the video copies, the secret YouTube links, and downloads of them. And we will be having a Reality Con soon in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Love you guys, and welcome to the Reality Revolution.